to order then. So today is Tuesday, August 2nd, 2022, and this is the meeting of the Templeton Community Service District Board of Directors. And with that, I'll ask our board secretary to do a roll call, please.
Directors English.
Here.
Bardonish.
Here.
Giardini. Director Giardini is absent. Logan.
Here.
And Peterson.
Here.
Okay. Please join me in Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Just one quick question: is people from the outside, can they get through?
There's no one else on the phone.
Yes, they would be able to, but we would have the same trouble hearing them, but they'd be able to observe the meeting. We would have the same steps, but we can accept additional persons on the Zoom call.
Okay. Okay, so order of business. I think we only have one item for order of business. And public comments, I will skip over, seeing that we have no public present in this room, nor on the Zoom call. And with that, I'm going to open it up to Sheriff Manueli, Lieutenant Manueli.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, Michael Manueli. I go by Commander. That's fine. Anything. I answer in everything. I try to introduce myself as Michael, then people call me what they will. Good evening. I have your report for July 2022. The station had 1,939 calls for service. Compared to last year, we had 2,207 calls for service with a 12% drop. Templeton accounted for 345 calls for service. Compared to last year, we had 469. That's a drop of 26%, rather significant drop in calls for service. On the contrary, San Miguel had 242 calls for service. Last year they had 187. They saw a 29% increase in calls for service.
Wow.
From those calls for service, the station generated 289 reports compared to last year, 243 reports. That is an increase in about 19%. Templeton accounted for 64 reports this year. Last year we had 71, a drop of about 10%. Looking at San Miguel, they had 45 reports compared to 20 the previous year, 125% increase. So we saw both calls for service and reports in Shannon go up, while we saw drops in both of those categories. Interesting. Breaking those calls for service down, looking at assault and battery, we had 8 calls for service generating 2 reports, battery report and a domestic violence report. Disturbance, we had 16 calls for service generating 4 reports. Had a subject reported to be punching vehicles, found to be intoxicated and arrested. Another subject was drinking beer, smashed the vehicle windshield, was spitting on the vehicle, and he was, well, I'm not sure what happened on that. We also had a large party here in Texas with what appeared to be high school age kids drinking alcoholic beverages. That party was broken up. Burglary, only 1 call for service, and it generated 1 report. Someone forced entry into a vehicle and stole documents, nothing else reported stolen. We had additional thefts. We had 6 calls for service generating 5 reports. Had a report of 2 females going into a store, grabbing snacks and leaving the store without paying. We also had a wallet and phone stolen. And then this one, a little troubling, but it could happen to anybody. A retired law enforcement officer lost his credentials that were taken from an unlocked vehicle. Lock your vehicle. Vandalism, we had 2 calls for service generating 1 report. Somebody reported an unknown substance or contaminant was poured into their gas tank. Trespassing, 8 calls for service, no reports. We had a trailer illegally parking on property. Subjects fishing on the caller's property without permission. and then dirt bikes trespassing on private property. Phone scams, we saw 2 calls for service, no reports. One victim may have given confidential banking information to the caller. Suspicious circumstances, we had 6 calls for service generating 1 report. The caller came home, found the door open, lights on in the house. When they arrived home, no obvious loss. They couldn't find any loss. It just looked like someone had gone into the house. 4th of July looked like for this month, we had 21 firework related calls for service, and there were no citations or arrests made. So 21 is really a good number. It's pretty low considering most calls for service reported this. And that is my report for this month.
Thank you very much for that. Any board members have questions? Yes.
Yeah, I want to thank you as usual for coming, Commander. We appreciate you being here. I had a quick question. A while back, there was a proposal for a communications center.
Yes.
At the substation location. It seems to have gone away. There was some community opposition to a large, what's described as a very unsightly cell tower that will be at our gateway. So I'm just curious if that project is still moving forward. I haven't heard anything about it. It went before TAG, got a lot of criticism at TAG, but TAG rejected it. But just curious if that's still moving forward.
It goes to the Board of Supervisor this month.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
For approval. So I know we have had it out to bid, and it goes to the County Board of Supervisors for approval on that.
At that location?
I would, pardon me?
At that location?
Yes. Okay. I did attend that TAG meeting and saw the concerns. I remember some of those concerns, and I am not part of that bidding process, part of the development or anything else, but I heard they were trying to address those concerns, trying to mitigate those concerns. But again, I'm not part of that. I do know it does go, is it the 23rd or the 20 something this month, Board of Supervisor meeting. So if it goes to approval, it will move forward.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks for the update.
Any other questions? Director Fardanish, do you have any questions for Commander Manueli?
No, I don't. Thank you for the report, though.
Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming and providing an update.
Enjoy being here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for keeping us safe. Okay, we'll move to our consent agenda. On tonight's consent agenda, there are 4 items. The first is the minutes of the regular meeting scheduled on July 19th, 2022. Resolution number 19-2022, conflict of interest amendment. And then we have the Smithwell submersible pump project budget. Boy, that's a mouthful. And then Lorera, pronounce that for me.
I'd say Larache, but
Larache, riparian agency agreement. So those are the 4 items on our consent agenda. Would any board member like to pull any of those items? Director Fardanish?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, with that, any questions that any board member might have on any of the items? Okay, well then, saying that there's no public on the call, I'm going to make or in the room, I'm going to make a motion that the board approve items A through D on the consent agenda.
Second. Wayne beat me to the punch.
Okay, so we have a motion made by Director Logan to accept the consent agenda, seconded by Director Peterson. May we have a roll call, please?
Directors Logan,
Aye.
Peterson,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Fardanish,
Aye.
Okay, so that motion passes 4-0, and we have 1 director who is not present. Okay, moving now to our regular business. We have a strategic plan update. So I'm going to turn it over to our general manager to walk us through where we're at with our 2021 or 2022 or 2023 It was our 3-year strategic plan,
Yeah, 2020 to 2023. Strategic.
ending 2023.
So, yes, this, good evening. This report covers 2 components of the strategic plan. You might recall there were several others. And we had the mission statement and, values and other items that were part of the strategic plan. This report covers the strategic priorities. Those are the items that were essentially the highest priority for the fiscal year. These items were updated by the board in May of 2021. And then this report covers the core strategies of the strategic plan. So I think it probably makes sense to spend more time. I mean, I haven't spent as much time as you talk about any component of this. Probably makes more sense to spend time on the strategic priorities, because these are the items that you could adjust for the current or the new fiscal year if you wished to. It was anticipated they could be adjusted, and they were last year from the originally adopted plan. So again, these elements of the strategic goals require immediate attention and focus because they're addressing them early and effectively is critical to the success. Again, this is just reading verbatim out of the document itself. The first item, there are 4. Complete the design, engineering plans and specs for the Nacimiento Water Recharge and Recovery Project at Creekside Eagle Ranch site. And it went on to read this. I'm reading what the actual priority was. Appropriate funding, issue an RFP for design and engineering services to support the development of the plans and specs for the project to permit future easement acquisition and construction. So that's as of last May of 2021. That's when that was drafted. The board actually held a workshop on this project on June 15th, 2021. It was determined at that workshop that the survey work would be completed first, followed by the acquisition of the easement that would permit the turnout pipeline to be constructed from the east side of the river, where the Nacimiento Water Project line is located, to the west side of the river where the district's property is located. The board approved a consulting services agreement with Twin Cities Surveying for the survey work last September. The survey work, however, was quite delayed. There's just a huge backlog. Even though we were on their calendar as of October, the survey work wasn't completed until about April of this year. We reviewed that survey. We didn't get just the easement survey. We got the entire site survey for eventual construction. They did a topo and whatnot. There's a number, like 4 parcels on the site, plus the river and the easement locations. So we're now in contact with commercial appraisers to get an estimate of the fair market value for the easement. This is an unusual request. It's not a residential appraiser can't do something like this. Because we're talking about an easement across a river, including in a mining site. So the easement site is part of a sand mine operation, or the preferred easement site is part of a sand mine operation. So we've been in contact with 2 appraisers. At this point, the earliest one of them could perform it would be about this fall. At that point, it's recommended that once that opinion of value has been determined, that we could go back to the property owner and commence or resume negotiations on the easement acquisition. The property owner was receptive in terms of willing to discuss it with us, but before we have an appraised value, it's very difficult to determine how much interest they're going to have, because the value is obviously important from their point of view. So that's kind of where we stand on this. Once it was determined last year that it didn't make sense for us to design the project, because the pipeline location was critical to the design of the project, and acquiring the easement first made more sense. So we have not proceeded with actual design work other than conceptual design, knowing where we want the pipeline to come over.
And it was my recollection that it was whether or not we got the easements determined how that pipeline would go.
Yeah, there
was some cost consideration as well.
Right, there are about 3 locations that the pipeline could be brought over, but they're gonna be, if we don't get the primary or the preferred alignment, the costs are gonna go up because the pipelines, our new pipeline will have to be longer, across the river and then come up to the property.
How many property owners are we talking about?
There's only one, the easement would only require permission of one property.
Okay, so it's not.
It's not terribly complicated. It's more about whether or not, in my experience, properties see like a government project coming to them and they get excited that they're gonna, this is the way they're gonna fund their retirement or some other major component of their life. And the reality is we're buying an easement in an undevelopable site. It's not gonna have the kind of value that, it's not gonna have that life-changing value to it. But rather than speculate on what that is, we'd like to get the easement and then we can communicate that directly to the property owner. And obviously, before we would enter into any agreement, we would get explicit authority from the board.
Other questions from board members?
Not questions, appreciate that. This is our highest priority. This is our board's highest priority. Bringing in water is a pretty important item here. It's, I had hoped this would be a faster process and that we would have made better progress on this item. So I don't know how we can accelerate this other than, going out and starting our own survey team. To the extent that we can accelerate this within staff, that would be my.
Yeah, it's not a staff constraint, really. It's just the nature of particularly last year, all of the support services were, for whatever reason, totally booked out due to other development demands. So I don't expect that will continue to be a barrier, but things have it definitely takes longer to do anything now than it did even just a couple of years ago.
Director Fordonish, do you have any questions on this particular item?
I don't have any questions. I just shared same comment as Director English. I just had hoped that this was a little bit further along than it is. Hoping that it could, it would speed up, the process would speed up soon. So, well, but that's all. I don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you.
I do have one quick question. If the one property owner, if you can't get any kind of a deal with him, how many other property owners for the other?
There's just one for each.
One for each.
My recollection is there's just one for each easement alignment.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Move on to the next one.
Sure. The next one reads enhance reliability and availability of water by ensuring full percolation and retrieval as a water supply with economic benefits. Treatment and compliance of the wastewater treatment plant is the current focus, with post-treatment filtration feasibility analysis on a parallel track. Additionally, the long-term treatment capacity of the wastewater plant be evaluated, particularly with regard to the type of wastewater the plant is now receiving, to ensure plans are in place to add necessary capacity so the treatment quality remains high enough to continue to allow all treated wastewater to be fully percolated as growth occurs. And so the update is during fiscal year 2021-22, 100% of the district's treated wastewater was percolated at the Selby site for future retrieval as a water supply. You may recall that we had implemented previously a spray field for access for water that we weren't able to percolate. So we were able to percolate all of it last year. Conceptual analysis of the wastewater filtration, and I don't know if it's bad wording here, analysis has been completed. There were 3 technologies that were reviewed, and a trial of one of the technologies is budgeted and planned to occur in this fiscal year. There's funding in the current year budget to do the trial of this most maybe on a very high level of the preferred technology, but not necessarily the only one that would work. So a trial for that is planned. Additionally, funding to begin an updated wastewater master plan has been included in the 2022-23 budget, but due to capacity constraints, will likely likely need to follow the completion of the urban water management plan, which will be required to be completed within 1 year after the district reaches 3,000 connections. And I think that was something that we've long known has been coming, but the urban water management plan is not part of the strategic plan, but is now going to be required from an external source.
Have we hit that trigger yet?
We have not, but we're expected to do so this fall. And the reason was there was some ambiguity because we have particularly one location, Meadowbrook Mobile Home Park, has about 100 units in there. The internal supply system is not the district's. This is not district water mains inside the park. We have 2 district connections. However, because the district, we previously entered into an agreement with the mobile home park to provide meter reading and billing to those customers. And so upon close review of the state water regulations that require the urban water management plan, if the district has direct communication with those customers and bills them directly, they're to be treated as though they're a connection, even though they're not technically a connection. So because of that, we had to count those additional connections. Otherwise, we might be a few more years away from doing the urban water management plan. So I don't know if the board wants a goal of the urban water. I don't actually, I think it's an obligation to complete one. I'm not sure there's a ton of value for us. It's a requirement from an external regulatory agency. But because these agencies have quite a lot of control over our systems, we need to comply with that requirement. And it will be, at least the first time we do it, a bit more burdensome. And so what I'm concerned about is starting too many things at once and not being able to complete the urban water management plan. So that's why I stated, and I think I mentioned during our budget workshop, that the master plan, both the water and wastewater, should wait until the urban water management plan is well underway. That said, we could also split up the water and wastewater management plan, master plan, and tackle those independently. But that's again, I think another consulting services agreement. So to manage. So the prior master plan for water and wastewater was done jointly.
Do you know what's going to be required for the new plan, or?
I mean, we could look to other plans as examples, and we have to have a drought mitigation plan. And we have those things; they're just not packaged in one place.
We have most of the components.
Yeah. I'm not.
They're not rocket science. And we have, again, this is packaging them up in the format. So
I'm not seeing this as requiring a bunch of policy type changes for the district.
Just time consuming.
It's just we have a big report to submit, and then it has to be updated every 5 years.
So have we even taken a look to see how there's the overlap between the two?
Well, there'll be basically no overlap between the wastewater management, the wastewater master plan, and the urban water plan. However, there's a lot of overlap between the urban water management plan and the district's water master plan. And what we didn't want to do is to have 2 different plans going on a parallel track that might end up with some conflicts. So that's why I have the comments on here. I think otherwise we were able to treat all of our wastewater to a quality that allowed it to be percolated. We have a better maintenance program at the Selby site, which is essential to accepting this water. And we're poised to do the testing of the filtration.
So do we have it in our budget for the urban water management plan? We do for this current fiscal year.
Yes.
Okay. Other questions? Director Frydonish, do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the third item is enhanced reliability and availability of water by building upon and further developing the integrated water resource strategic plan, quantify supplies, identify key actions, develop policies to serve current and future needs, and evaluate the options to secure additional water resources such as Nassau Meadow and permanent water conservation. So that is the adopted goal from May of 2021. The update is funding for an updated water master plan, which will include the completion of the previously identified components of the integrated water resource strategic plan, is included in the fiscal year 2022-23 budget. However, as noted above, this item is recommended to begin only after the urban water management plan is nearing completion. Additionally, funding for the continuation of the water softener and landscape retrofit rebate program is included in the fiscal year 2022-23 budget, and we continue to see interest in both programs. So you might, just to back up and talk just real briefly about the integrated water resources strategic plan. When we did the last master water and wastewater master plan update, which was adopted by the board in the fall of 2013, there were items that were essentially missing from it, and it became one of the goals was to develop this integrated water resources strategic plan separately. About 15 items were in that. We've tackled about 10 of them, the most important items over time, but there still remain a few. So our goal was to just require that the next water master plan update reflect the items that we've already accomplished, as well as those handful of items that remained. So they would be then inclusive in the water master plan.
I would support not having an additional document and just combine. That seems to make sense.
Keeping them separate?
No, I think you're saying combine those items into the urban water management plan, correct?
Into the water master plan.
Water master plan.
Yeah.
And all these items, there is a lot of overlap between
Yeah,
these
I would
various
think it
needs.
would be.
So like, for example, one of the items of the integrated water resource strategic plan that we tackled early on was the buffer policy. So we developed that buffer policy, we modeled, we bring that to you every year, and it's working well, but that's not necessarily part of the master plan document because it was done afterwards. So we would want to codify all those policies into this water master plan, including the components of the integrated water resource strategic plan that have been done, and the small number, I believe there are about 5 that remained kind of incomplete. Part of the reason we haven't dove further into this is we've had a big turnover in staff, particularly in the utilities group, right? So our new utilities manager wants to be a part of the development of these, so he develops a background and understanding. Additionally, because both myself and of course Justin weren't a part of the bulk of the work that took place for the 2013 master plan, we have a lot of questions. As a matter of fact, during that program, the district changed consultants during the middle of the program, and all the modeling that was done of all the pipelines and flow modeling was done by a consultant that the district didn't complete the plan with. So we'd like to, because of that, there's a number of projects that are identified in the master plan that we would like to, as a staff, have greater level of confidence in before we start down the road of constructing them. Things like upsizing pipelines in Bethel Road and other locations where there isn't a lot of development. We really just want to make sure that there's a need to continue to program funding for those projects. And the water master plan will assist in developing those projects, or reassuring that that was the right items to continue to plan for.
Questions? Director Fredonish, any further questions from you?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you. All right, it sounds like there's a considerable amount of effort that needs to be done here and focus to kind of sync this all up.
Yeah, it's just something that because of this urban water management plan requirement,
coming sooner than
coming
expected.
sooner, I'd like to complete that before we start on other projects. We do have some capacity limitations in terms of properly managing too many projects at once.
Yeah.
And again, and I particularly want to make sure we avoid having any conflicts between like items. Now, again, we do have the option, and we will tomorrow and the next month and everything and so forth, of splitting the water and the wastewater master plans. If we recognize that there's some wastewater constraints that are more quickly approaching, because we've actually made much more significant changes in the wastewater system over the last decade. We can still move forward because there aren't any conflicts between the wastewater system and the urban water management plan. Okay, the fourth item.
Can I follow up on that item? We seem to have some capacity constraints, and I get it. We're not a huge agency, and we have limited staff. And so a number of our initiatives are held up, or we're not able to advance them. Have you thought about bringing in some consultant to manage a project? So you can still, I think there's some capacity constraints in terms of staffing. One, I think that we have some different skill sets in our utilities now, where there may be some opportunities to have project management, and not necessarily out of engineering. And two would be that we brought in someone like a John Hollenbeck. I mean, I'm just throwing a name out there. Somebody who has capability and can manage a specific project. I think the next budget cycle, that may be something we want to look at is bringing in some staff augmentation, because I get that Tina's overwhelmed and there's just limited amount she can do, but there's options. Well, and we just don't have to say we have staff constraints.
Yeah, no, I think it's so to answer your question, I haven't really gone down that road, but there's no reason that we couldn't. One of the things that we'd like to do is, because the 2013 master plan again gives us some pause, not only because, like say, Justin and I weren't really a part of that. We want to be part of the next. I want to make sure I have a great level of confidence that it's working. So we want to be more attached to the master plan updates. I'm less concerned about, say, the urban water management plan, because I view that as more of a regulatory document.
And that's actually the one I would refer to have somebody else take our policies and package them up and get them ready to go. Any one of the multiple engineering firms in the county. It's not that complicated. It's not that complicated. I would agree. The master plan needs hands-on, heavy duty involvement with our utility staff, thorough review. That's a document that will establish our fees, and actually it establishes our developer fees. So I think that's one that we would want to focus on. So kind of picking and choosing based on the importance to staff level. I mean, if it's just packaging stuff up, maybe we look at the urban management plan and bring somebody in who can package that up for us, so it doesn't put off some other things we want to do.
But one of the things we wanted to do is just get that underway. It's inevitable, so there's really no reason to wait. We need to. I don't think it's going to require a ton of staff effort. Again, it's a compliance document, but it will be some. So I want to get that underway, and then we can see, okay, how much work is it going to take to get completed on the staff side, and are we ready to start these 2 master plan updates?
But I think you raise a good point, because if it is just packaging up policies and documents, it's for a government agency, a regulator, that is something that I think would be appropriate for a consultant to do under, Justin's supervision and your supervision. But I think that would be good to just free up staff. The master plan, I agree, because staff has to have buy-in on that, because you're going to own that. The other is just really complying with the regulator. And I think it would be appropriate just to get it out of the way. If that's really must be completed first, I would say get it out of the way as soon as possible, because I agree. This plan is a 3-year plan, but it seems like it's taking a while to get real traction on some of these projects.
Well, remember, we added these projects to it a year into it. These were not the originally developed.
I agree, but I think they're needed projects, and I think we just need to kind of keep the momentum going. And I think I support that idea of, you know, looking at consultants, especially on this particular item.
So yeah, we're gonna get to, we're gonna get pressing forward sooner than later on the urban water management plan. And once that's underway, we can pick up the pieces on the water and wastewater master plan. They don't have to, we don't have to totally conclude it, but I want to make sure it's underway and the staff time. We know what the staff commitment is. So we don't have, and again, we just really want to be careful about having any conflicting information between the documents because they're both going to be pretty current. They're going to be developed in a short period of time from one another. So,
Director Fredonish, do you have any comments on this item before we move to number 4?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, were you going to say something else?
I'm sorry, no.
Okay.
So number 4, complete the evaluation and consideration of 3 significant water policy concepts. Analyze the legal and policy issues associated with permitting unconnected water units to be transferred to a parcel owned by the same entity. B, adjusting gallons per day unit assignment based on current patterns and consider options for adjusting the previously issued units. And C, consider options for an incentive relinquishment program and place these items on the board's agenda for discussion and develop policy revisions and ordinances that are necessary to implement any changes to the current policies that are desired. So the update is in June of 2021, the board discussed delaying further discussion on item A listed above specifically. Since that time, no further, this particular item has been shown as to be determined on our agenda tracking, and no progress has been made. There was an interest on the board's part to not tackle the transfer concept until the Nacimiento Recharge Recovery Project was underway. And of course, obviously you can discuss that tonight and see if you want to make adjustments. We haven't done anything with the gallons per day unit assignment. That could be rolled into the water master plan because it really predicts future water use. Could be part of that effort and component. And then item C, I wanted to spend more time on because it's far more straightforward because the legal analysis and policy work for this item was done in 2014. Remember, we had an incentivized relinquish program that we developed that ran for 1 year. Now, it did not produce the desired results. And so the program, and so it was only intended to go for a year, but it didn't produce the desired, nobody used it, essentially. We had some inquiries, but nobody used it. Since then, there's been just some talk at the board level about whether or not that we should do something to make it easier for people to relinquish. That program would be simple is probably not the best word, but not difficult to put it back in place and make it a permanent offering. What has changed is there has been more talk, particularly recently in the past 6 months, from parties exploring relinquishment. And what's occurred to me is what has changed is these parties are now paying a monthly fee for these water units they're not really being able to put to use. So they might be more motivated now than they were in 2014 to actually follow through and use the relinquishment program. But there's no way to know. We could implement it and it could still do nothing, and so that you could look back and say that time was wasted. It's possible that it would bring some folks to the table who are otherwise standing by. We've had inquiries from a small number of property owners on relinquishment. That component is something that we could bring forward in a relatively short period of time if there was interest at the board in doing so, in doing what we had before. Again, because the legal work was already done, we would need to make the code revisions that were in place for that year a permanent part of our code. We would need to develop a budget that relinquishment program, just to remind you, what it did is it dropped the $500 fee for relinquishing a unit so that there was no fee that a property owner paid the district to process a relinquishment. And it added to the amount that the property owner or that whoever owned the parcel at the time the unit was acquired paid for the unit. It added to that the interest that the district would have received based on LAIF, local agency investment fund rates, since the time the district accepted payment. So because many of these go back like 30 years. So it's not a lot of money, but it's you know, better than the argument that you've had on my money for 30 years. And
but I think what we need to also take a look and say, well, what about the payment that was made for the virtual? So I think there would have to be some kind of little tweaks made to that. So I'm going to ask, is the board willing to have this as a future agenda item?
Yes, I'm actually in favor of all these items being a future agenda item. When we, back in June of 2021, our interest was moving Nasumia as fast as we can, and staff said, you know, we can't do both. So we decided collectively that, you know, let's put these on the shelf, still a priority, but you know, we don't want to hold up Nacimiento. So I'm certainly in favor of bringing that particular one. Actually, the last two I'm in favor of bringing forward. I actually like your suggestion of rolling that the recalculation of the gallons per day water use
In the
because that actually, you know what, for me, that's a water source for us. Because what's really happened is a lot of those kids, not all, but a lot of those water values are greater than the actual use of what people are doing. So we're reserving more water than we need. And so that means that people who may want that water are not getting it because it's being reserved for somebody else who will never use it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for me, it makes sense to move forward. That's a water supply opportunity. So if we could roll that into the urban water master plan, or actually the water master plan, you know, that would make sense for me to just direct staff to roll that in and do that as soon as possible. And then I think the relinquishment program, absolutely. You know, especially if a lot of the work's already been done, and you're not going to have to spend a ton of time doing research. The top one is certainly a lot more complicated, and I'm not opposed to it, but it certainly has its challenges and complications. But the other two, I'd love to move forward on all these items, but those two, I think, let's.
I would agree. I'm going to recommend, my recommendation would be to continue to defer the permitting of unconnected water units to be transferred between parcel owners. But I agree, if we can take item B, the gallons per day calculation, and include it in the water master plan, that makes sense. Because I agree with you, because I've looked at my own water use and it's like, I'm not even hitting that. 575 per day. But item C, I agree. I think it'd be worthwhile in resurrecting that. And to your point, if now people are paying that virtual meter fee every month, if they don't have plans to develop, why are they continuing to pay? Yeah. And so I think people will begin to say, why am I paying? Maybe I should just relinquish. So I think there is an opportunity there.
We have had folks who entered into the virtual meter agreement. Again, that was back in the end of 2018, right? Because the deadline was January 1st, 2019. So we have had folks who've entered into those agreements. Remember, we really didn't have we ended up getting something like 85 or 90% of the units that were out there connected virtually or otherwise, physically or virtually by then, which was somewhat of a surprise. That was not something that we had expected. So there were only about, I don't remember the numbers offhand, but a fairly small number that didn't connect. Now, what's been interesting is we have had folks come back and say, you know what, I put this into a virtual meter agreement, but I don't know when this is ever going to happen. I'm just going to quit paying for it. I'll let the value of my agreement lapse, essentially, because the agreement is tied to its payment. And so now they're just like an unconnected water unit. They're not tied to, again, some small number. So I think folks have, I don't know if those same folks are going to say, well, okay, I'll take $3,000 for this water unit when I think it's worth 40, but they've come far enough along to not pay for it anymore. And we, again, I know of at least 2 property owners who have inquired recently and are told us they're thinking about it. So we haven't had a relinquishment in a long time. I would hate to process one tomorrow and then come up with this incentivized program a month later and then have them miss out. I was thinking this could come back and it would be essentially a cleanup version of what we had done before. In other words, interest, because we've done the legal analysis on this, interest on the money since it was paid, dropping of the fees. The district would have to budget money to pay for them directly because our formal relinquishment program requires a buyer to be available. The seller doesn't get the money until the district collects, and there's just a little bit of ambiguity. If we have the incentivized program, we have money in the budget. If you had a water unit and you said I'm ready to relinquish, you can bring us whatever records we need. You confirm the amounts, and we write you a check, and then we would process the relinquished unit separately, and you wouldn't have to be a part of that any longer. So you had mentioned though just a moment ago the something about the virtual meter agreement and the money they've paid towards that. They're paying like $25 a month per unit just to keep the unit current. So that money went into the water operating fund. It wasn't tied.
Well, and I would say that would not be a refundable expense if they so choose to relinquish.
Yeah, they'll just not pay anymore.
Yeah.
I would be in favor of really pushing the envelope on it. This is transitory money that we're going to sell that unit again.
Right.
Or and actually my objection to the whole private water sales is that that money that is bought for goes back into the improvement of our system. If we let private sales, that money goes somewhere else. It doesn't go into the improvement of our system. But if we could be aggressive with every opportunity we can to increase the incentive and
To relinquish.
Yeah.
Including potentially a refund of those virtual.
Yes, and so any way we can boost the value, because one, we're going to get it back, and we're going to get back much more than we sell it back for. So we're not worried about it. And that'll be temporary. I don't know anybody who's going to challenge. I mean, the issue is us, providing some kind of incentive would be that somebody said, "Hey, it's a gift of fun." I don't know who's going to challenge that. No. I mean, it's really,
That was the issue back in 2014. It took us quite a while to get agreement. Hello.
Hey guys. That's my son and his dog. Hey, Tyler. They're out for a walk and.
Oh, wait a minute. He's a Templeton. Why isn't he in here?
Come and join us. That's right.
Yeah.
So we had done the legal research and resolved it. And I agree. Our effort back then was to try to push the envelope. We could explore this virtual meter agreement to ensure that we could overcome the gift of public funds argument. Have some findings that would prevent that from being a lot of exposure. But honestly, I think they have not received, other than satisfying the district's water code requirements, they haven't received a benefit. They didn't receive the water, right? We haven't had costs other than mailing them a bill.
Yeah.
So that's something we can look into and bring this item back as a discussion item to show that we've satisfied that. If there's general interest, I think in doing so, and then it would require again some code changes and a budget amendment to put this in place. But it's not terribly complex.
So Director Peterson, you're looking like you're in favor of this as well?
I am, yes.
Any other comments?
Are we postponing A then? I mean.
So what I'm recommending is that we postpone A.
Okay.
And that we move forward with having B part of the water master plan. And then also C, that we have that as a future agenda topic. So, and I think
I agree.
You're in favor as well. Director Fardanish, are you in favor of that?
Yes, I agree with the relinquish program. We should take a look at it and try to incentivize people to relinquish the water units. As far as the other one, looking at the water usage and I guess that's to me a little bit more complicated, and I guess I'm just going to leave it up to the general manager to kind of figure out what's the best way to proceed and figure those out, because I know with that, if we do end up changing things, there's a lot of other things that we need to do. So that seems to be a little bit more complicated, but definitely as far as water relinquishment, I agree with that.
Okay. All right, thank you. So I think we've got,
Consensus on.
yeah,
And then
I think we have
if
consensus
and
on
then
that
when
approach then. So
Okay.
we'll put that
And
as a future agenda item.
Yeah.
and then when
I think,
general manager
I think that can be
Okay, and
something
then-
to be accomplished in the next few months.
Okay.
The core strategy review, these didn't change. These were adopted originally in May of 2020. They were part of what was developed back that all-day workshop I believe it was late February 2020. So I'm happy to discuss this as much detail as you'd like, but there's a number of them, obviously, and you may not. Maybe you want to just ask me about ones you have questions on, unless you want to go through them one by one.
So what would be the board's thoughts here? Do you want to go through each one of these, or are there any that you have?
Not necessary for me unless you want to go through them. I did have a question on strategic goal number 2 about the Nacimiento percolation. We've been able to percolate 100% at the treatment plant. And I know that our current utilities manager has had some good experience in the Atascadero with dealing with percolation in their ponds. Have there been improvements where we could actually perk some of that Nacimiento water?
We are. We are.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so we're tracking that, so we're going to get credit
Absolutely.
for that water. So
Every ounce. Well, okay, maybe every gallon, but yeah, no. Every gallon. Yeah, we actually started that we took the Nacimiento water offline when the East Side Force Main project was coming online, so we had sufficient capacity. But once we were able to get the water quality in 2020 stabilized at the treatment plant, we started bringing that online. And so what our current plan is to take water about 100 cubic feet a second. No, that's not correct. That's not correct.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's way more. It's not nearly that much. We're taking water about less than our capacity from about May through December. So what we're essentially doing is we want to make sure we have wet weather capacity, because wet weather does a couple things for the wastewater. One, we get higher inflows, so we have more effluent. 2, we have conditions change at Selby where the ground, it doesn't accept the water as rapidly. So yeah, no, we're taking we're maximizing that water. We're actually we're not too far behind of where we were before the East Side Force Main project was online. Good. And it's working pretty well. We're taking more water than we're going to need, but we still want to demonstrate and prove to you and the public and everyone else that water is available to us. So yeah, every gallon's being tracked by every month it's put in track.
And so in future, when the buffer policy is made, that will be considered into the buffer policy.
It's in the buffer policy
Will be
now.
Available. So
Yes.
Okay, good. That's great news.
Yeah, it's there.
And hope that would be the case.
Yeah, and we're going to continue to maximize that. Again, it's not fair to call it a trial and error, but really it's about trying to. There's a lot of factors that deal with the percolability. We have total control of Nacimiento. We can turn it off on virtually a moment's notice. So if circumstances change, we can turn it off. That provides capacity, additional capacity for wastewater. And the 2 ponds that we've historically used for Nacimiento water are working well for that and for wastewater, quite frankly. Not nearly to the degree they work for Nacimiento water, but you might recall that 5 years ago, there was these theories out there that those ponds will never work. They do. They just don't work as well.
Okay, great. Good news. Thank you very much.
Okay, so let me just quickly go through these and see if any board members have questions on the core strategies. On the first one, the water strategic goal of enhancing reliability and availability of water resources. Any comments or questions? And Naveed,
can you hear me?
Yes.
Do you have a question?
Can you hear me? Yes. I do have a question. Actually, I was trying to ask a question regarding priorities that we should be looking at. This is for the general manager. I know last meeting that we had, all 5 board members were concerned about IWMA and what we need to do, how we need to proceed. Do you think that should be put on as one of our priorities, a strategic plan or anything like that? Or is that something that you'll be working on the side yourself?
I don't think so at this point.
I don't think I need further direction. I suspect, though, it's possible that if we, let's say we identify an alternative to IWMA and it's pretty burdensome, then maybe we want to rethink that if it takes a great deal of time. But at this point, we're going to work towards developing alternatives and doing some analysis of pros and cons of each of those alternatives to determine whether or not there's interest in proceeding with one of the alternatives. So it's just I think an internal study at this point.
I think you probably should wait on that too until we have the Parks and Rec and Refuge Committee meeting, which is going to be in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Well, it's my expectation that the Park and Rec and Refuge Committee will kind of look at this at a high level and come back to the board with some recommendation as to whether or not to proceed with any alternative.
What I'm saying, it should wait when you start.
And if then at that time the board should wish to pursue it, then I think it becomes part of our strategic initiatives.
Agreed.
Do you agree with that, Naveed, that approach?
That would be fine. Okay, thank you.
Did we lose him?
No, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh my gosh, you're not going to believe it. We can hear you in the room.
Wonder what happened. The computer was well.
Okay, so you obviously heard that approach in terms of in answer to your question. Do you agree with that approach?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. All right, so then moving on, any comments on the first item? If not, we'll move to the second item, the full plan for the NACI allocation percolation. I think we talked about that. The third item is the wastewater strategic goal to complete projects that allow for full percolation. We talked about that. Any further comments or questions on that?
Congratulations, good job.
Okay. The improved TCSD wastewater source control. I think there's been some work done on that. Any comments or questions on the core strategies that are listed in that category?
No, just not on the questions, but I'm assuming that we're still making progress on getting some of those folks who are going to do pre-treatment. That's moving forward, and we seem to be making great progress in that area.
So yeah, I mean, I think the outreach has been successful. There's really 2 targets there. Let's take the restaurants and those folks as a sort of separate group of customers. With the dischargers, and we're talking about the primarily wineries and breweries, but there are a few others, cheese manufacturing, sheep's milk, that kind of stuff. We've had pretty good luck with extensive communication. We have 1 new pre-treatment permit that's issued and in operation at Barrel House. Their system, I want to say came online in May. So it's still early. You know, these are not plug and play necessarily, even if they're advertised to be such. They take some dialing in. So like they killed their biology, you have to kind of restart and, until you can get the systems balanced. But they've made an investment, and so we expect that this will result in improved wastewater. On the restaurants and whatnot, I wouldn't say we've made great progress. We've actually had to issue a number of, now you have to respond. And we have issued, I think, 2 fines of $150 for essentially non-responsiveness, folks that are just not just kind of, just staying, it hasn't risen to the level of attention that's been necessary. But The proof will really be in our testing and our sampling to see is it steadily improving. Obviously, we're not having the kinds of upsetting situations at the wastewater plant. Not that it's perfect, but you remember when this first came online, we had used up essentially all the capacity of the plant during these heavy periods, and that's no longer the case. That's both plant improvements and probably some benefits at the point of discharge. I think what we found were there were folks that because we hadn't had much of a presence, that they knew what they signed up for, which was to haul the stuff off, but because there wasn't a lot of teeth there, it was a lot easier just to let it go down the drain. They knew what they were doing. So.
I agree. So I think this is a big success story for us. And I think I agree the proof is in the pudding. And so kind of whether that those BOD levels are where they should be. And so I'm assuming we're doing ongoing spot testing.
Yes. Yes, as a matter of fact, we've just bought. We still have a lot of trouble with the sampling system. Like a lot of the samples weren't problematic, and so we weren't getting reliable data. So we just put in the budget for 2 new composite samplers that could take a 24-hour composite and could keep the material cold, which means the results are more reliable.
Okay. Any comments from you, Director Pardanish?
No comment.
Okay. All right. So let's move on to number 5 regarding ensure that all areas of TCSD operations meet or exceed regulatory standards. And any comments or questions on that? Okay, we'll move to number 6, Park and Recreation. Increase funding support for the facilities and programs for Park and Rec and close the department deficit. So I think there's been some success there on a number of the core strategies there. Any comments or questions from any other board member? Okay, moving on to number 7, improve park and recreation maintenance to meet the recreational needs of the community. I think there's been some success there with getting volunteers. Do we have an ETA on the second core strategy, ensure increased staffing includes park maintenance?
Well, we haven't increased staffing, if that's the question. We haven't added maintenance staff. We do have a new maintenance person. You probably haven't met him yet. His name is Nathan, and he started here, I believe, in April. Does that sound right? Okay. Yeah, sorry, I should know that better. So about 3 months ago, and that's allowed us to have kind of a renewed focus out there in the parks. We have undertaken some projects that were specifically requested by the soccer advisory board in terms of turf rehabilitation, particularly at the German Park, some areas that were worn. And but this was really recognition that really the amount of money that we dedicate to maintenance is slim for the expectations of how the parks be maintained. We would need to dedicate additional resources to improve maintenance beyond so let's say 3/4 of one person at the park. But we have since this strategic plan was developed, now we've merged the Parks and Recreation Fund with the Solid Waste Fund. So over time, we should see if there's funding available to add additional maintenance dollars.
Did we include it in this fiscal year?
No, just the one staff member.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, moving on to number 8, provide fully funded and staffed fire and emergency services to the community. I think that's a success there, and that's been completed. The only comment that I have is under the second core strategy. It says here that for exploring cost recovery through third-party billing services. such as emergency services to residents outside of Templeton. And it's really, it's non-residents, non-Templeton residents where fire and emergency services are provided. But the comment to say that it's not expected to become a significant source of revenue, I take exception to that because looking at the fire and emergency services budget, we need every nickel and dime. I think it's a matter of saying, is the cost recovery worth pursuing? Is it going to be a dollar chasing a dime, or is it going to be something that's going to give us the extra revenue that we need? And I don't think we've gotten to that point to say that it's, I don't think we're at a point where we can make a decision.
Oh, no, I don't think so either. So that's my writing, so I apologize.
Okay.
When I say it's not expected to be a significant source, it's not expected to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. Maybe all revenue is important. And it's not my opinion that it's not worth pursuing. I just don't, it's just not it's not a large source of revenue. It still may be worthwhile.
Yeah, and I think we need to act on that to kind of put this one to rest, because this has been hanging out there for a number of years. And I think we need to make a determination. One, I think it's come up, can we legally do it because of the contract arrangements with the ambulance service in the county? So that I think still needs to be determined. And then, you know, is it something that is worth pursuing? But every nickel and dime is going to be needed. If there's revenue to be sought, I think we need to pursue it. So just some comments there. Any other comments on number 8? Okay, moving on to number 9, create a fire and emergency services master plan. That's been completed. Then number 10, the operate TCSD under sound financial management to ensure all operating costs and future capital projects are fully funded. Any comments from any board members on that particular one? Number 10. Okay, moving on to 11, collaborate regularly with other governmental agencies and local organizations to create opportunities for TCSD to deliver enhanced services to the community. And I think kudos to our general manager, because I think you've done a lot of outreach to other organizations within the community, which has been a challenge in the last 2 years with COVID. But I know that you still try and maintain those contacts and those relationships. So
yeah, we have, it's been an interesting time because I think the especially partnerships with like Atascadero Mutual Water Company and our partners with the Nacimiento Water Project and with the Atascadero Groundwater Basin, and those are some key ones. You know, when everything went to Zoom, it is harder to collaborate, and we've had a couple little runs at coming back in person, but not sustained. And the only one that I want to comment on more substantially or call to your attention is really the events within the community. I think many of us were thinking that at least a number of those opportunities would come from the Chamber of Commerce. We could participate and had before. And the Chamber, I know if I've shared this information with you, but we haven't really talked about it. The Chamber merging with the Paso Chamber is probably better than a chamber just going away. But it's a Paso-centric chamber with some Templeton members. So I don't know. I mean, the Paso Chamber did run the activities at the park on the 4th of July. Although that's always a very casual event. You know, it's a sort of a drop by kind of a thing. They did coordinate that effort. I don't know if our historic Templeton events, the Templeton Wine Festival, the Templeton Beer Festival, the Founders Day, although that's taken on different forms over time, those kind of things are in the cards going forward. You know, I've had communication with the Paso Chamber staff, Gina Fitzpatrick, I believe, is the CEO, and one other person who works in their office, just to share information. And we are still a partner with them. With, you know, we have they essentially inherited all of the Templeton Chambers items that is stored at the wastewater plant in a conic, in a, you know, a sea train. So we've had some communication and whatnot, but I don't know what's going to happen with the events, and if there's going to be demand placed on us to become more involved in special events. The chamber, the Templeton Chamber, events became more and more important to it as a fundraising source for its staffing costs.
Mhm.
And so maybe when those costs went away, there's the need to fundraise for them went away, and those things may not come back. It may not come back in the way they were.
Any other comments?
Well, one, I don't
Sure.
think we're in a position to step in and start leading those. It needs to come from that business community. But the one thing about the chamber going away that I think we need to do something about is the chamber newsletter. And there was a magazine in the past, and so we really don't have much of a forum that goes out to everybody in the community anymore. And I've heard several comments, you know, bring back Templeton Matters and, you know, do some things like that. So, you know, I think all we do now is social media, and there's still a lot of people. I don't know how it's effective with some people. It's not necessarily effective with everybody. And, you know, is there an opportunity for us to do some kind of print publication, even periodic, that we had in the past and we no longer have? And that's one of the things I was sad to see go with the chamber. I mean, you know, because that was a partnership. It's been a while since we've done it. But
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That's maybe a more direct way of communicating with the public. So just what we had a quarterly newsletter, and then that went to like a twice annual community magazine that the district did put together with a publisher. And what happened about 8 years ago or 9, somewhere in there, is the publisher came back and said, we can't sell enough advertising space to fund this. So if you want to keep doing it, it's going to be at your cost. You're going to have to pay for it on top of the just providing material. And so at that time, the chamber was doing something similar, or was trying to, and said, well, what if we join forces? Maybe together we can have enough content that somebody will take it on, sell the advertising, and then print and distribute. And the chamber went through 2 or 3 publishers. You know, and I was generally happy with our component of the material we got. Like, you know, we got what we needed out of it, and the public got it at no cost. And then that program was getting ready to go into a new publisher, and then COVID hit and just everything just sort of stopped. And of course, then, you know, now the chamber's kind of folded now, or has merged with Paso. That was definitely a Templeton specific product. I mean, I don't think that, you know, there is a Paso magazine that probably you and I get, and, you know, but I don't think our information that goes to, you know, that goes, if our information was in there, 3/4 of people who received it aren't in Templeton, or maybe 80% of people aren't in Templeton. So it's not a very it doesn't reach just our target audience. So yeah, I think that's interesting. I think if we were to go down, I mean, there's obviously a cost involved. You know, many of these cities in the chamber did work with again, a publisher who would sell advertising space. I don't know that our content of our material lends itself to a lot of advertising support. But we think, you know,
looking for those opportunities to bring something like that back. I mean, for me, that's maybe a goal for the next edition of this. Would be, you know, get a new board and go back through that. I mean, I would recommend that we do something, because it was an effective tool, well received, and reach some people who aren't reached necessarily by social media.
And I would agree, and it would probably help to maybe get some of the seats filled in here.
I doubt that, but.
Well, but I think if you at least had a publication that spoke to when are the meetings, you know, how can you join the meetings? what does the district do? Just a reminder, and in some of the park and rec activities, there's a number of things that I think you can put in there. I don't think it has to be as slick as what we had with the chamber. I think it's coming up with something, and it's maybe just twice a year.
I don't think you
so
were
I think
around
it's-
when they had the other one, but everybody seemed to like that one. Or Jeff will have to write an article in it.
Yeah.
That's what
Well,
Bill's.
I agree, though. I think it's a way of just
People like
reaching
that.
out to people, and I think we need to probably look at, how can we better reach out to people to get people more engaged than what they are. So I think there may be an opportunity. And to your point, I think because we have now gotten lost in the passive chamber.
Yeah, it's just a little, it's,
That was
the
terrible.
world's different than it was just 2.5 years ago, and.
Yeah.
And I think it is a shame that of all of these items, this is the one that I don't know. I don't want to sound too critical of that, of what's happened, but.
It's bigger, it's bigger. It's no longer
Templeton
small
centric.
and- Yeah, it's no longer focused on Templeton. So I think it's a good point that you raised. So I think it's.
I did go to one of the Paso, they did have a chamber mixer at Barrel House, so it was in Templeton, so I absolutely went. And I will continue to look for those and attend. And it'll be great to get a sense of how that's all working. It was, of course, I think it was their first mixer since COVID, so we had a lot of people were out and things like that. But it's interesting, but I definitely think we could, because the committee that was formed a few years back with directors Giardini and English kind of concluded that the written print was something that a lot of people wanted. They didn't want to become solely reliant on social media, or they weren't looking for the district to have a huge social media presence, or at least that it's its primary source of information. So yeah, I think it's possible to do something. If we have if we did something like Templeton Matters, where it's not got advertising content, it's I think it went out quarterly. It's just you're not recovering in your costs at that point, but it could be that we'd have more control and it could be more effective.
Yeah. So I think it's something we can discuss in the future. Any additional comments on 11? So let's move on to number 12. There's a number of things, the compensation study we completed, the ways to reduce increasing recruitment cost and training. I don't know that that's something that we've had such turnover as you pointed out here. So that's kind of difficult to control those costs. Any comments on 12 or questions? 13 is ensure continuity of the district's legacy expertise into the future. And you've got that you've had some turnover there. Any comments or questions from anyone? Okay, number 14, develop TCSD strategic plan and regularly track progress. That's what we're doing this evening. Any comments on the number 14? Okay, number 15 is the TCSD board and staff regularly fosters the spirit of community pride, and that is central to sustaining a vibrant future for Templeton. I think COVID has really kind of dampened that one for all of us. So I think, you've got here is ongoing. Any further comments on 15? Okay, no further comments on that. I want to say thank you for updating the strategic plan. We've made a lot of progress, but there's still a number of things that we still need to do. And hopefully we can continue to work towards reaching those goals. So thank you.
I did have two follow-up questions. One is on some of these, it's a funding issue. We talked about Park and Rec and fire. CFDs, I was not involved in, I was absent on the night of the budget process. How much is that generating now a year? Are we starting to inch up a little bit?
Yes, we are. And really not this current year, but next year is going to increase pretty substantially because the apartments, people self-help units on Peterson Ranch is gonna almost double the CFD revenue, so it'll jump to about $70,000 a year. Yeah, I mean, it's not, it's probably not gonna grow in a linear way, because we're gonna have ups and downs, but most of the projects that are on anything new is gonna have the TFD requirement. The exception that's still not developed, that is not entitled, that has entitlements pre-CFD, is the large commercial tract on Los Tablas.
Okay, yeah, well, that's an opportunity certainly, and at some point we're gonna be able to convert some of that money to maintenance and to fire and some of these other goals that we have, so it's gonna take a while.
I would agree.
And then my second question was, it kind of missed it on Evers. What's the status? I know I get the updates. You're still dealing with some ADA stuff. Are you gonna be bringing that?
Yeah, so we're going to bring an item to the Parks Recreation Regs Committee on the August 19th. The design team has designed a revised sidewalk and revised the roadway entry to accommodate ADA and still maintain the width. That they're requesting a budget amendment in the design work to deal with that requirement. And then we have updated cost estimates for the whole project. And we've outlined a kind of a core project and some bid alternatives to present to the committee to show that we can still move forward with most of the work and maybe all of the work, depending on where prices come in. Our design team is saying that prices have stabilized. We're no longer in that really rapidly rising period, but it's still there still aren't a lot of bidders out there and whatnot. So the fact that the project is now scheduled for summer 2023 might benefit us. Okay. I guess we'll know when it comes, but it seems I'm a little more optimistic that might work out in our favor.
Any comments from you, Director Fardanish, on strategic plan before we close that topic?
No comments. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any comments? Okay. So let's move on to General Manager's report.
Okay. So apologize for the technical difficulties earlier. I guess we're up and running now and know what to check for. And thank you for bearing with us, Director Fardanish. Our apologies. Couple of items. Another IT related issue. We had a pretty significant problem yesterday where an employee opened up a file and ended up exposing a password. We had to do like an emergency password reset on all devices and brought on two, or what's it called, multi-factor authentication for all logins to prevent further exposure of the district's internal system. That actually went okay. I mean, it was a very disruptive day, but it all took place yesterday. And I think we're all back up and running now. Very disruptive yesterday, though. Did want to mention that we've hit a new record high in soccer participants. We have 826 kids signed up right now. That's about 40 more than we've ever had before. 40 more than our pre-pandemic high. And we're probably we'll end up with some refunds because that's just always the case. Some cancel it, some people, something happens. But we'll also end up with some last minute late, it's already beyond the late entry time, but we'll still take some additional participants for divisions and age groups where we're trying to fill up a team or something. So that number could grow a little bit further. So I think the previous record high was 785, so 826. We will be playing games at Evers, at German Park, and also at the middle school grounds on Main Street. And then finally, a reminder that we are in the middle of, and maybe past the middle of, the nomination period for candidates for the Templeton Community Services District Board of Directors and any other November elected office, local elected office spot. And as of this evening, the county's report on candidates list does not show any candidates for Templeton Community Services District, either papers issued or actual candidates, although maybe from what I'm hearing earlier, that's not 100% accurate, but that's their published report. So August 12th is the deadline for everybody. If one or more of the incumbents does not run, it will be extended to August 17th, but only for new candidates, non-incumbents.
So incumbents have to file by August 12th.
August 12th. And there is no longer a office location in Atascadero, so.
Yeah, that at the heart.
So those are the items that I have.
Okay, any questions from board members?
I have a question. I don't know if this is the time or not. Do you plan on having some kind of a staff appreciation this year? I mean, I think that's very important for the staff and for us.
I think it is too, and I think it's a great suggestion. You know, I was thinking just a couple months ago that, okay, now, you know, we're kind of past the height of COVID, we could do something outside, and then we got obliterated with COVID.
Yeah.
So, so I guess the long and the short of it is I'm open to suggestions. I still feel like doing something outside is safer, you know, mostly safe. But I don't know. We had, you know, we got four of our 6 utility operators sick within 2 days. So in late June.
Well, and typically you've done that in September, have you not?
We've done both a kind of a summer picnic kind of thing, lunch thing, and then a holiday.
Yeah.
More in, you know, restaurant, you know, this is pre-COVID, of course.
Yeah,
but
restaurant, yeah.
Yeah, we can still do, absolutely can do a staff, like a lunch appreciation. That's probably, you know, that I feel like would be, nothing's foolproof, but COVID wise safer than doing something indoors. And then we've done kind of an alternate thing in the last couple of holidays, you know, when we've given out a gift card and stuff. But I agree. It's not matching the camaraderie building that a true in-person activity, especially across departments. You know, I was just thinking since COVID, since really the beginning of 2020, we've turned over about half of our full-time employees. It's a lot.
Maybe you could look at, for the sake of a better word, have something catered instead of actually having people bring things and cooking it out there, which I think would probably work better. I'd be willing to help fund that. I don't know about the rest of the board members, but so
I think we have funding available. I mean, we have funding in the budget, but I think it's so we can absolutely do something.
I think something at the park would be appropriate. I think, you know, unfortunately, I think COVID is going to be something we're going to have to a certain extent live with. It'll be like the flu. But I think if it's outdoors, I think all the better. And maybe next month the weather will be a little less humid than what it is now. So I think it's a good suggestion. I think we've been in lockdown for 2 years and it's time to come out.
I'm right. I'm with you.
Yeah, party on.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments? Director Pradanish, any comments or questions for the general manager?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Let's move then to committee reports. Do we have any committee reports? I know there's none in the packets.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I haven't had a chance to put together a written report on this one for a little while now. The TAG board meeting happened in this room on July 21st, and I wanted to thank Carrie. She came in and trained me. They had some AV problems. We're allowing them to use some of the system, and the person that was trained didn't show up. So they were asking me, and I was kind of clueless on tech stuff, so it didn't work out really well. So I've since had a little bit of training from Carrie. Thank you for doing that. And I understand she's gonna put in place some practices where they come and set their things up early during the day, just get it ready to go. So hopefully they won't have those problems in the future. Anyway, so there were no items of real interest. They dealt with a vacation rental item, and it was a vacation rental where it was close to another one, and they were looking for a variance on that. And it was declined by TAG, but there weren't any other items of substance. So yes.
Earlier you mentioned TAG in their review of the proposed sheriff's dispatch center.
Yeah.
The only item that I have that's related to that is the county did release an EIR, or I can't remember, it might have been a mitigated neg deck. I can't remember the document, but I did get notification that was released, and I have a link to it if you're interested.
If you could forward that to me, that would be appreciated. I mean, I'm wondering how they mitigated some of the concerns that were brought up.
The tower is still included in the project.
Okay, any other committee reports? Okay, we do have an engineer's report in the packet. Any comments or questions on that? Okay, I did notice that there are a proposed 23 lot residential project on Main Street. Do you know where exactly that is?
It's right behind, you know, where Woody Woodruff.
Yeah, it's Gibson and Old Town.
Yeah, is that the one?
Let me read it and see if it jogs my memory. It's let's see if it's stated in here.
So I thought Woody's was just 18 units at Gibson and Old County. I was just curious because it did say on Main Street.
On the second page.
Yeah, it's on the second page, the last bullet or second bullet at the top.
Oh, I believe it's actually further north on Main Street, on the west side of Main Street, kind of south of the sheriff's substation.
Oh, okay. Okay. And then the other question that I have is related to the, we talked a little bit about the enforcement and the two food service business that were not compliant. Do we have a status on where they stand in terms of compliance now? Because they were fined.
Yeah, I mean, their fine just went in the utility bill they would have received like 2 days ago. So
Okay.
that's just occurred.
All right, and we don't know why they're not complying. I mean,
These are just non-responsive,
but we tried to reach out directly.
Our consultant,
So-
there's been multiple attempts to
Okay.
reach them.
Okay.
Letters, phone calls, whatever.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on the engineer's report? Okay, director's reports and or comments. Any comments from any directors on meetings that you attended on behalf of the district or various district activities?
TRF will be hosting the wine booth at the concert in the park tomorrow. So bring your wallet and imbibe. So,
Okay.
thank you.
All right. Okay, with that, our next meeting, we have another AB 361 resolution. We also have the Woodruff virtual water meter agreement requests, and then the fire station repair budget amendment. So that's what we tentatively have scheduled for the August 16th meeting. And with that, I'll adjourn the meeting at 8:43. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening, Naveed.
Good night. Bye-bye.